Hello and welcome to the Happiness Festival, hosted by the Happiness Institute in association with Going Live. I'm honoured today to be joined by Aretha Wickramasinghe. Aretha is a pioneering activist in the field of diversity and inclusion. He has spearheaded a number of initiatives and pro bono projects promoting diversity, equality and human rights, specifically LGBT rights globally. Aritha advises lawyers around the Commonwealth, challenging laws that criminalise homosexuality, was instructional in lobbying for the transgender equality inquiry by the Women and Equalities Community of the British Parliament through his work for non-gendered, and is currently advising the UN Human Rights Office on introducing a global curriculum based on equality and human rights. He's also running a campaign to promote LGBT equality and has advised the British government on using business to promote human rights. And he joins us from a lovely beach in Sri Lanka today. Welcome.
Hi, Chris. Hi, thanks for having me.
Great. And today, Aritha talks about whether societies that are more inclusive and celebrate diversity are happier and better off than societies that are less inclusive. So whenever you're ready, Aritha, go for it.
Thank you, Chris. So today I want to speak about and ask the question, whether are inclusive societies happier? I just want to imagine that you're a woman working as an engineer. You've studied long and hard for your job, and you have been performing amazingly well. And the British government, or any government, then decides to pass a law where all businesses must make salaries paid to their employees transparent. It's payday for everyone, and everyone's salaries are now published on the company intranet. You look at the salary paid to your male colleague, who has the same qualifications and same level of experience as you. And then you realize that you are both paid the same. How would you feel? Imagine you're a Muslim woman fasting during the month of Ramadan. You're in the office as you have deadlines to meet. You know it's going to be a late night tonight. When the sun is about to set and it's time to break your fast, your non-Muslim colleague brings you some fruit and water. How would you feel? Imagine you're a black man. You went to your local store to buy some groceries. You take out a $20 note to pay for your goods. The cashier notices something wrong with your money. He thinks it's possibly a counterfeit and suggests that you report it to the police. You step outside the shop and you see a local police officer doing his neighborhood round. You show him the note. He takes down your details, asks you whether he can take you to the station and carry out his investigations. You give it to him and you wish each other a good day. Now, if that happened, George Floyd would be alive today. Now, when you heard me narrate each one of these stories, how did you actually feel? Were you in suspense that the woman engineer was going to notice that her male colleague was getting paid more than her? Were you worried that the Muslim woman was going to be unable to break her fast? Did you think that the police officer was going to kneel on the black man's neck? But how did you feel when each one of these stories has had a positive and inclusive ending? Were you more sad, or were you actually more happy? I'm hoping you wanted that woman engineer to be paid the same as her male colleague for the same work. I'm hoping you wanted someone to look out for that Muslim woman who was breaking her fast but working late nights. I'm hoping you wish that George Floyd was alive today. I'm hoping you were happy. But you see, the examples you just heard from these stories and the hopes you had when listening to them are just not the reality lived by most people. Women earn 77 cents for every $1 earned by a man to the exact same job. Reports of Islamophobic incidents rose 692% in the UK in the week immediately following the Christchurch shooting last year. In the US, a Black person is 150% more likely to be killed by a police officer than a white person. These statistics are stark and depressing. They're the result of a world that is still struggling to become inclusive. You see, inclusivity is the practice or the policy of including people who might otherwise be excluded or marginalized. It is about valuing everyone as an individual and about creating a society or an environment where everyone feels able to participate and achieve their full potential. Now, diversity and inclusion have been a very hot topic in national and business narratives for several years. But big business is paying attention to diversity and inclusion, not only because it looks good for your company brochure, but because research backs and proves that more inclusive societies are far better off than those who aren't. Research also proves that more inclusive business performs much better than those that aren't. Now, in a 2019 report by Deloitte on the importance of inclusive policies, Deloitte's research arm presented evidence that social inclusion generates economic benefits. Their report found that increasing the proportion of women in senior leadership to 50%, which is parity, would increase profitability of a business by 2.1%. Now, the US recorded corporate profits of around $8 trillion in 2019. Just in America alone, if senior leadership in American companies had parity in the number of women, that's a $160 billion dividend waiting to be reaped. A 2014 World Bank study estimated that the economic cost of discriminating against LGBT persons can be up to 1.7% of GDP. In India, that is $32 billion a year in lost economic output. In the UK, that's $47 billion. Imagine you're a transgender woman going through your transition at work. Your boss fully supports you during your transition. And there's actually a celebratory cake for you on your first day at work as a woman. There are also no debate about which bathroom you should go to. How would you feel? Research shows and suggests that an LGBT person who's not about their sexuality or gender identity in the workplace is 30% less productive than someone who's out. It's very clear that inclusivity makes national, cultural, and economic sense. But how does it impact well-being? What is the point of economic growth if it doesn't make people happier? Are inclusive societies actually really happy? Now, we've got new research which was published last year in the Journal of Positive Psychology, which sheds light on this very, very interesting question. Now, in 2019, a team of researchers from Kyoto University in Japan and the Polish Academy of Sciences examined over 90 countries to test their relationship between living in an inclusive society and life satisfaction. They found that citizens living in open and inclusive societies, such as Sweden, Norway, Switzerland, were significantly happier than others. Jordan, Tunisia, and Azerbaijan, for example, ranked the lowest for inclusivity, and Ethiopia, Armenia, and Zimbabwe ranked the lowest for happiness. Now, to arrive at this conclusion, data was measured from a number of publicly available data sources, including the World Happiness Report and the World Values Survey. They measured happiness by combining questions on subjective well-being, satisfaction with life, and current happiness. To measure societal openness, the researchers combined individual responses to 4 items: tolerance towards homosexuality, trust towards other people, readiness to sign a petition, and beliefs regarding materialism. Basically, it asked questions on tolerance, trust, civic engagement, and non-materialism. Using these measures, the researchers found a robust positive association between societal openness and happiness, even when other factors such as wealth of the society were taken into account. But what do tolerance, trust, civic engagement, and non-materialism have in common? Why are societies in which these four attitudes are popular happier? The simple answer, according to these researchers, seems to be that each of these four attitudes benefits other people. Being tolerant obviously benefits the people around us. Trusting strangers benefits other people. Our own civic engagement may bring us some personal benefits, but it also benefits other people and improves society as a whole. And being non-materialistic also makes people less focused on accumulating money and possessions and more focused on other important issues, such as your well-being or your mental health. These four attitudes can be thought of as the open or inclusive society attitudes. The fact that societal happiness relies on how our attitudes benefit others has important practical implications. If you wish to enhance societal happiness, incentives to adopt these attitudes needs to be orchestrated by government bodies, international and local organizations, and every single person who deserves and desires a happier society. An inclusive society is a happy society, and a happy society is a better one. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aretha. That was absolutely brilliant and so poignant to today's sort of climate. So I think I'll jump straight into the questions, and I just wanted to find out a bit more about you. When did you decide you wanted to become a lawyer and wanted to fight for the things that you talk about in your talk?
Well, I think that goes back to when I was a child, when I was about 12, 13, and I was in Sri Lanka still at this time. We had, of course, a civil war going on. But at the same time, as a child, I used to read the newspapers on a very daily, regular basis. And at the time, there was a lot of incidents and reporting of child sex abuse and child physical abuse happening in Sri Lanka. And surprisingly, until very recently at that time, the age of consent for sexual consent in Sri Lanka was only 12. So pedophilia was kind of legal at the time. And it really shocked me as a child that there were these horrific things happening to other children and very little being done about it. And even though the law had just changed at that time from 12 to 16, there was obviously very little awareness and very little enforcement. So around that age, me and a few other of my friends in school, we decided to actually form a child rights group, which would comprise just children. And what we did was we would educate other students in our school and go to different schools in our city, educating children on what their rights are. And you really saw a mindset change happening amongst children who became more empowered as young people because they were just more aware and more educated. And we also, petitioned to UNICEF, the United Nations, and the National Child Protection Authority to take issues of child sex abuse and child physical abuse more seriously and to carry out more campaigns and more enforcement of these issues. And to see that transformation during that time as a child, what we all did, it really gave me belief and confidence on the power of the law to effect societal change. And I think that's what really started me to want to become a lawyer in order to push to societal change. Now, that does not mean that I became a human rights lawyer straight away. And I still don't really actually describe myself as a human rights lawyer. I'm pretty much a banking and finance lawyer. But societal justice is very important, even for a capitalist or free market society to work. Because if we don't ensure this justice, if we don't ensure this equal opportunities for people, if we don't ensure that everyone is treated fairly and given the opportunities which they deserve and have worked for, then we don't really have a free market, or we don't really have a capitalist society. What we're seeing now with increasing inequalities in societies is not capitalism, it's actually feudalism, where only a few are controlling wealth and everyone is paying rent to live on someone else's assets. So so I think that is where really my activism comes from, where I see this injustice and where I feel that we all need to live in a fairer world, and we all have to play an active and a vocal role in ensuring we get that fairness.
Well, obviously starting from a young age, and that I'm sure explains why, for example, the Financial Times sort of dubbing you as one of the sort of future LGBTQ leads of our time. Is that a role that you sort of naturally found yourself in? Did it come as a surprise to you?
Oh yeah, I mean, I was totally surprised. I actually thought when they first called me, I was like, "Are you sure you have the correct Aritha?" And my surname is so long and unpronounceable. They were like, "Yeah, we don't think that many people have a surname like yours." So, when I came to the UK and to London, I was an immigrant. I was a gay man. I was, a religious minority. I never I never thought that I would get the kind of opportunities I got there, or to even be recognized alongside, people like Mark Zuckerberg or Inga Beer. And when I was at Clifford Chance and I was sort of, you know, doing this work in introducing more inclusive policies, demanding more action by law firms and our clients to be more inclusive, setting up these networks, carrying out these campaigns, trying to create that education program. I mean, I did it because I really believed that those are the right things to do. And I didn't even know there was something called this FT ranking really until I had got nominated for it. So it really it shocked me, but it also really made me proud in some ways that the work I was doing had value. And it also sent a very strong message to Sri Lanka and Sri Lankans. Aside from the civil war background which we have, it's still a criminal offense. Homosexuality is pretty much a criminal offense here. And for most of us growing up, aside from especially young LGBT people, they never had any role models. They never had someone. They were never told that they could be lawyers or achieve anything or have any kind of professional career because of their sexual orientation. We were always told that we had to hide those characteristics and be ashamed of it. But I was never ashamed of it. And for me to have achieved that recognition, it was a message I wanted to send out to LGBT Sri Lankans or any LGBT people who are living in countries that don't treat them equally, that do criminalize their lives, that you can be whatever you want to be. You don't have to be ashamed of yourself. You don't have to let anyone put you down. You can really strive to be the best. And I'm proud that I was able to become that role model through that recognition. And I'm actually grateful that that opportunity was given to me.
That's great. I'm sure so many young Sri Lankans look up to you in that way and for doing everything that you've done. So that's very, very impressive. And you mentioned about your mission to educate young people about social and emotional intelligence, which is extremely important. But how does this fit into the current school curriculum involving stratified subjects such as maths, chemistry, art, music? How does it fit in there?
So the education program, which actually I'm no longer a part of, and I get to why I left the program. It started, the plans for the program started around 2015, and it was founded by film director Leslie Adwin. And this was soon after she had made this film called India's Daughter, which was about this horrific gang rape of a medical student in a bus in New Delhi in 2012. And when that film was made, it got banned in India. And that's when I Pro Bono, it's an organization which I work for. I head the Polity Law program. We're a network of lawyers which provide access to justice to people who are denied justice. We have about 80,000 lawyers in our network now in 39 countries, and we have a very strong presence in India. So we intervened in this matter when the film got banned to challenge the ban, but also to support the values and the message of that film, which is about addressing gender inequality and the mindset which can lead to someone to gang rape a woman in a moving bus and just throw her out like that. We want to understand that mindset and to stop it. And when we conducted a lot of screenings in London at the time to educate people with this about this film and what it was trying to communicate, we had several conversations amongst us. So, most of us were lawyers in that group, and we say, you know what, you can have as many laws as you want against rape, against discrimination, against violence, but unless you actually change the way people think and unless you actually change their values, we are not really going to solve these problems. They will keep cropping up. And you've seen it, our laws have only got stronger. Our law enforcement, in some countries gets better. But these crimes are not really changing or reducing. They're still happening. And it's a mindset problem. So we thought, okay, how do we actually change people's mindsets? Well, of course, it's education. But where do we start? We were lawyers and filmmakers. We are not educationists. So we started reaching out to Montessori, to Yale, Stanford, child psychologists, neuroscientists, to understand what can we do to create a new curriculum for children. Because one thing we understood that was missing in education system, Chris, we've all gone through schools, is that, we're taught, in schools we're taught maths, we're taught science, we're taught literature, but we're not taught how to be human beings. It's like this missing subject. We don't teach children how to be human beings. We have an education system that's designed for the 19th century industrial revolution. And then we push these people out after school, and then we expect them to be these great, noble characters. And one thing I really realized through this program was, these sort of criminals and monsters which we have in this world, people aren't born like that. They've just not had the right kind of value-based education. And that is what leads them to carry out these horrific acts. And that's where the importance of empathy came, and that's what we try to teach with this program is, social and emotional intelligence, so empathy, compassion, respect, critical thinking, problem solving, self-regulation. And for us, it was very important that we integrate this program with national curriculums in schools, and that the program is primarily designed for children between the ages of 3 to 7, which is when about 75 to 80% of a child's brain development takes place. So that was a critical phase when a child's value system and their ethos and personality was being developed. That was the period which we wanted to make sure that social emotional intelligence and skills were ingrained in the child. So we worked primarily, and we still do, but the organization still does, but primarily with governments in integrating this curriculum into their national curriculums. Now, unfortunately, I did leave the organization, and this was in late 2018, so almost 2 years ago, although I'm a great supporter of the organization. But I left it because as a gay man, I moved back to Sri Lanka in early 2017. to set the program up here and to lead the program here. For me, it was very important that because as a Sri Lankan, because I was so involved in setting up the program, I really wanted Sri Lanka to lead in something. And for a long time, being a developing nation, being a conflict country, we were never a leader. We were always followers, or that's what we were taught, that we should be followers. And I wanted us to really be a champion in education. And this is the opportunity. There was, Sri Lankans involved in this program. Why should we not lead? And it's a groundbreaking with government in setting up the program, integrating into the school system. But unfortunately, my sexual orientation became a problem. And when the success of the program, when the program became very successful, there was a lot of media discussion about it. A lot of school teachers were coming out and saying how incredible transformations that were happening to children under this program. Unfortunately, certain persons in political positions, certain extremist religious figures started pointing the finger at me and saying, look, there is a gay man that's leading this program. This program is promoting homosexuality to young children. The program had nothing to do with homosexuality. You cannot teach a 3-year-old child about any form of sexual relations. They're playing with toys and reading storybooks. But it was a very, very difficult time for me. It really broke me because aside from me, there were so many people who put a lot of hard work into this program. And there were so many incredible changes happening to children because of this program. And to know that all of their good work was being damaged by my sexual orientation, which was something I couldn't change, made me very helpless in that situation and made me feel very guilty that I was causing this sort of damage. And there was a very real major risk that these accusations and allegations, the stories of this, would spread to the many other countries the program was being piloted in. And most of them, were countries where homosexuality was a criminal offense. And so we had to stop that kind of risk of it being spread. So that was when I took the decision that I will leave the program and disassociate myself from it, so that at least its good work can continue. At the end of the day, the purpose of a program like this was to change these discriminatory mindsets, And our hope was that, you teach every single 3-year-old child these values and you give them that kind of education. In 15 years, you're going to see systematic generational change as they become adults and future leaders. And if that requires me to step out and get out of the way so that vision can be fulfilled, then that's far more important than me.
And facing this intolerance that sort of arose from your work, how did you sort of move past that, and how did that sort of fire you to carry on this work? Because it must have been such a, as you mentioned, such a difficult situation to move past.
Yeah, I mean, life always has its ups and downs, right? And a lot of the work I was doing for this program is part of my pro bono work and things I'm passionate about. They're not things which were my bread and butter. They were also not things I was really an expert in. But my fee-based work always continued, and it just, in some ways, leaving the program gave me room to focus on issues such as LGBT rights and gender issues, which I could now speak more freely about. During the time I was working on the program, I had to control what I was saying because I was working so close with government. I was working in schools and children, and I knew that there were certain things I couldn't say because of the country and climate I was in. But now that I was able to leave, it has actually in some ways freed up my time to speak on the issues, especially around LGBT discrimination, which I have been and continue to remain very vocal about here, pushing for constant change in policy and legislation. So you have to step up and just go on with life and wish your colleagues the best.
Well, a lot of what we've talked about here at the Happiness Festival is like resilience, and yeah, it seems like you've got sort of that in abundance. And I wanted to go back to, so you mentioned instilling empathy into younger generations is critically important. One of the guests that we had on previously, a brilliant psychologist from Yale, Professor Paul Bloom, highlighted that putting empathy at the core of decision making may be a big mistake. I'll just read a short extract from his book. It is easy to see why so many people view empathy as a powerful force for goodness and moral change. It is easy to see why so many people believe that the only problem with empathy is that too often we don't have enough of it. I used to believe this as well, but now I don't. Empathy has its merits. It can be a great source of pleasure involved in art and fiction and sport, and it can be a valuable aspect of intimate relationships. And it can sometimes spark us to do good, but on the whole, it's a poor moral guide. It grounds foolish judgment and often motivates indifference and cruelty. It can lead to irrationality and unfair political decisions. It can corrode certain important relationships, such as between a doctor and a patient, and make us worse at being friends, parents, husbands, and wives. I just wondered if you could sort of give your take on this and where your thoughts lie.
I want to share with you a story on empathy. And then I will use the basis from the story to challenge parts of that narrative, but also to agree with certain parts of what this professor says. So in the ThinkEco program, the first week's lesson was based on a storybook called What I Like About Me. And in that book, it's a book about different children, each one who looks different. Some have red hair, black hair, curly hair, some have freckles, different shades of skin color. And the purpose of that book was to teach children on how to appreciate themselves and love themselves, and also to appreciate others and to learn to love others. At the end of that week's lesson, each child would be given a mirror. There would be one mirror in the classroom, and each child would look at themselves in the mirror and pass and share with other children what they liked about themselves. And then they would each give that mirror to the other child, and each other child would say what they liked about themselves. So it's this kind of empathetic education. There was this one girl in this class. She was 3.5 years old. She had a terrible eczema condition, which she had had for about 2 years since she was 1.5. Her condition was so bad that the teachers had to clean her about every 15 to 20 minutes because there would be pus oozing out from her wounds, and they had to change her clothes about every 45 minutes. And her parents actually thought she was possessed by an evil spirit, and they were going to move house because they thought the house was cursed, and they were also going to move school because they thought the school wasn't doing enough about the situation. None of the other children ever wanted to play with her. They excluded her from, little games that kids would play in the playground. They wouldn't even want to sit next to her because of her condition. Now, when this mirror came to this child, she looked at herself at that mirror, and she told the rest of the class and her teachers that she said, "I like my face." And this is the first time she had shared something positive about herself with her other fellow students in the class. And that weekend, her mother saw her daughter look at herself at a full-length mirror in their house, and she was looking at the rash on her skin and saying, "It's okay, it's my skin, it's okay." You know, she was 3.5, and she accepted herself. And from that time, there was this remarkable transformation in this child on how she behaved and accepted herself, and how the other children who used to ostracize her and were not empathetic to her situation and condition treated her. They would play with her, they would speak to her, they would hang out with her. She would be part of the clique of young children playing in the sandbox in school. And her teachers called me about a month into this program and said, "Look, Aritha, you need to come and observe this student. This is what has happened. These are the changes we're seeing." And I went and observed the child. She was like any other child. I could see some conditions of a rash still there. But the teachers also said her condition was getting remarkably better. Within 2 months from that first lesson, she was completely cured. Her eczema, which doctors had been treating for 2 years and had no result, was only worsening, had gone. And it had gone purely because she was able to accept herself, and her friends accepted herself. They became empathetic to her situation. You see, empathy is very, very powerful, because what empathy means and what it does is that it allows you to understand a particular situation from the viewpoint and the eyes of the other person. And it is very, very important when you make decisions, when you have relationships with someone, that you're able to understand someone else's perspective. We don't live in this world alone by ourselves. You know, we each share it with about 7 billion other people. In our day-to-day relations, we're always having engagements with at least 100 people who will have in our network of friends and family. If we are able, for us to be able to have strong, positive relationships with people, it's important for us to understand their perspective. Now, it does not mean that all our decisions in life must be guided purely by empathy. It doesn't mean that empathy needs to take the most amount of space here or be even the central point or value upon which we base those decisions. Empathy is powerful as a tool when it is used together with other tools. Those tools are what are our values and our moral code. Those tools are also the rationalization of decisions and situations. And those tools are also the regulation of our emotions. They are all critically important. If we can only feel the sadness of someone else, and we take on that sadness to become our sadness, without any regulation of those emotions, then you are not really solving the problem. In order for us to solve the problem of someone else's sadness, it is important for us to understand their sadness and to understand the perspective of where the sadness comes from. But it is important also for us to be able to separate ourselves from it, to regulate our emotions at that point, and then to come up with a solution for that sadness based on our values and a certain moral code. So, although I do agree with certain perspectives given by this professor, I think it is wrong of him to sort of put a statement that discards empathy. Empathy has to be there to drive that decision. Right now we are, in the midst of discussions at the global narrative and discourse on the treatment of Black people across the world, but especially in the United States. What causes a police officer or any man to kneel on the neck of someone else and not do anything while he's begging for his life and saying he can't breathe? That man did not have empathy. Because if he had empathy, he would know that this person cannot breathe and he is going to die because of his actions. he didn't have to put his knee on his neck. You could have very well made the person, unable to move through handcuffs, blocking their legs. So it's that lack of empathy, that lack of value for someone else's being or their perspective, which led to that death and which led to the enormous amount of discourse, violence, protests that's happening across the world. So yeah, that's my position on it. Empathy is very critical, very important, but like anything on their own, it has only so much value. But all other decisions without empathy will lack a very critical and important value upon which that decision has been made.
And you mentioned the obviously tragic case of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement that has been triggered by it, and of course all of the other incidents that have led up to this critical civil rights movement. But how would you translate these movements into shifts in policy?
It's a very good question. And that's something which I've also been asking some of my friends who are in the heart of this movement. I think in terms of policy, there is definitely more need for accountability from law enforcement and government on how people are being treated and what sort of and how we can hold accountable those in power and those who have control over our lives and our states. I mean, if you look at these particular police officers, for example, it took them a very, very long time for government to even decide to prosecute these police officers. They're still not even being prosecuted for first-degree murder. It's a second-degree murder. Any one of us, if we purposely knelt on someone's neck and killed them, knowing while they were begging for their lives for 8 minutes or 12 minutes, we would be in jail immediately and we would have been prosecuted for murder because it is murder. So if an action which we do amounts to a crime and murder, why are not people who are in positions of authority not measured by the same yardstick that we are? What gives them immunity which we don't have? People in positions of power and authority should be more responsible than us because they have so much more power. With power must come responsibility and accountability. With power, it should not be that more power gives you more immunity. And that is the system which we are in, especially in the United States. More power has meant more immunity, which is the very reason why there are presidents like Donald Trump, or you have, dictators in many parts of the world who are doing whatever they want to do, saying whatever they want to say because they know there are no consequences for it. And there are such huge repercussions, ripples and waves of it, which happens as a consequence of that lack of accountability. So I hope that is going to be the policy change, the legal change, which we will see, is more accountability, more responsibility on the people who have more power in our society.
Great. Now we've got a few questions that we ask every speaker, which I want to move on to because I'm aware it's a Saturday. I really don't want to take too much of your time up.
And I have to go to the beach next.
Exactly. If you had unlimited resources, what area of research or what policy would you fund to drive forward to make the most good in the world and change the world in the way that you think would result in a happier, healthier society?
I would invest in reducing inequality. I think the extreme inequalities which we have got in our society leads to a lot of problems in it, from access to basic things such as healthcare, education, a job, a decent quality of life. There is too much wealth that has been taken from people who already have very little to people who already had a lot. And it does not mean I don't believe in the sort of redistribution of wealth by, nationalizing people's assets and forcefully transferring it to others. I think we need to start by investing in better education resources for everyone, especially more money needs to go into areas which have been historically deprived of those resources. There needs to be better access and better quality free healthcare to everyone, especially again areas which have had those poor health resources. In the UK, there's always a discussion of the postcode lottery, depending on which hospital you can go to and how long a waiting list will be. And generally, the postcode lottery means that if you're in a poorer area, you're not going to have a better hospital. If you're in a poorer area, you're not going to have a better school. So when you have situations that because of where you live and because of your financial economic circumstance, you're not going to get a better education, you're not going to get a decent education. And when you're sick, you're not going to get the decent healthcare which will cure you, then how can you be able to fully contribute to the economy or to look after yourself when you were denied and deprived of those two very critical things which the well-off and wealthy had access to? So you get trapped in this sort of vicious cycle of poverty, which only gets worse. So, if I had that kind of unlimited resources, those are the key things I'll spend it on: better and equal access to education, healthcare, and financial support for people who are in desperate need until we come to a more fairer and more equal world.
And you're someone who's, dealt with, I'm sure many things in your life, and you've really had to show resilience in those times. Do you have any tips and tricks for people to live a happier life that help you, even if that's reading a book, watching Netflix, anything like that?
I think one of the happiest moments I had in my life was when I was 15 and I came out to my friends and family about being gay. And that happiness was not only realized by myself personally, but my friends and family around me. One of my best friends, she told me, she said, "Aritha, you seem so much lighter." I was carrying little weight because I felt that it was such a burden on my shoulders to hide my sexual orientation. And the lesson I learned from that was how important it was to be yourself and to be honest about who you are. Unfortunately, we still live in societies in a world where, a lot of people tell me, "Oh, Aretha, you're so brave to have come out as being gay at 50. You're so brave for being open about your sexual orientation." But, it shouldn't be something brave. It shouldn't be an act of bravery to just be yourself. It should be the easiest thing for all of us. And it should be that happiest moment for all of us if we could live and if we could be who we are without hiding anything about ourselves. Because that kind of hiding is weight. And weight pulls you down and weight reduces your happiness. So my main advice to people is really try to be your true authentic self. Be proud of everything that you are, including your imperfections, and not be afraid of that.
I think that slightly answers my next question, but the final question: what does happiness mean to you?
well, aside from being myself, I guess also to know that I'm loved. It's I love a lot of people. I love my parents, my partner incredibly, my family, my best friends, my all my close friends. Um, but to also know that love is being returned, it gives me a real sense of happiness. And you can take away my wealth, my assets, which not that I have that much, um, but um, but my sense of security really comes from the fact that I know I'm loved.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Aritha, for joining us today. It was absolutely wonderful listening to your talk, and thank you for answering all our questions so eloquently, and yeah, really brilliant answers. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much, Chris, and thanks for having this happiness festival. It's a really cool idea. Whose idea was it, actually?
So it's a sort of brainchild of our founder Kayan, but it's a number of people, Avi, who you met before the call,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a number of us working on it. But yeah, it came at a time that we thought was really sort of influential, and it needed to happen. Really, we're going through a period of almost global sort of value reset, where people are going back to live with their families, having to build their personal relationships almost up again because they're being forced together. So we thought it was an idea before this all happened, and now this all happened. We thought, this is such a good time to speak about happiness, and maybe to affect a shift in the way that people value their lives, rather not on material goods and stuff, but just as you said, personal relationships. I think that's what really brings happiness to many people. But yeah, so again, thank you so much.
That's
And
great.
I just wanted to know if you could let us know where we could maybe follow your work, or if you have like a social media presence. Yeah, any sort of tags or websites that you want to mention.
Yeah, you can find me on Facebook. Well, my name is a bit complicated and long, but it's Aretha Wickramasinghe. You can follow my profile there. It's a verified profile, so it's coming from me. You can follow me on Instagram. That's aretha.w. That's my Instagram handle, and you can follow me on Twitter. That's at Aritha. So yeah, I look forward to engaging with all your participants and people who watch this video.
Amazing. Thank you very much.